The desert air shimmered with heat as Kira Thorne adjusted the sight on the Mark 17 SCAR rifle for the third time that morning. Her calloused fingers moved with practiced precision, each micro-adjustment deliberate and calculated. The weapon felt familiar in her hands, like greeting an old friend after a long absence. Petty Officer First Class Rourke Manning watched from behind mirrored sunglasses, his arms crossed over his tactical vest. The SEAL team leader had that look she'd seen 1,000 times before, the one that said he was already writing her off before she'd even fired a shot. "You sure you can handle that thing, Thorne?" Manning called out, his voice carrying across the firing range. "That's not exactly a pea shooter you're holding there." Kira kept her eyes focused on the target downrange, a standard silhouette positioned at 300 meters. She could feel the weight of a dozen sets of eyes on her back. The other contractors had stopped their own weapons checks to watch the show. This wasn't about qualification scores or training metrics. This was about proving something that shouldn't need proving. "I've handled bigger," she replied without turning around. Her voice was steady, professional, giving nothing away. Manning let out a short laugh that his teammates echoed. "Right? I'm sure you have. Look, no offense, but this isn't some basic rifle course at Fort Leonard Wood. We're talking about precision weapon systems that require serious upper body strength and recoil management. These things will knock you flat on your back if you don't know what you're doing." The morning sun beat down on the Nevada training facility as Kira finally turned to face him. She was smaller than most of the men on the range, her frame lean but solid from years of disciplined training. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her green eyes held a calm intensity that Manning seemed determined to ignore. "I appreciate your concern, Petty Officer, but I think I'll manage just fine." Manning shook his head and turned to his second-in-command, Chief Warrant Officer Blake Torino. "This is exactly what I was talking about, Blake. Command keeps pushing these diversity initiatives without thinking about operational reality. You put someone who can't handle the equipment in a combat zone, and people die." Torino nodded along, though his expression showed less certainty than his team leaders. The rest of the SEAL team had gathered around now, their morning weapons maintenance forgotten in favor of this unexpected entertainment. "It's not about being mean or anything," Manning continued, raising his voice slightly to make sure Kira could hear every word. "It's about physics. These weapons systems were designed by men for men. That's just biological reality. Women don't have the muscle mass or bone density to properly control heavy-caliber precision rifles under combat stress." Kira had heard variations of this speech more times than she cared to count. In training facilities from Quantico to Fort Bragg, from private military contractors to federal agencies, there was always someone ready to explain why her chromosomes made her inherently less capable of doing her job. She turned back to the rifle, checking the chamber one final time before settling into her shooting position. The familiar routine calmed her mind and focused her breathing. Prone position, legs spread for stability, left elbow planted firmly on the ground, cheek welded to the stock. The Mark 17 was indeed a serious piece of equipment. Chambered in 7.62 NATO, it could reach out and touch targets at distances that would challenge even experienced marksmen. In the right hands, it was devastatingly accurate. In the wrong hands, it was a liability. Manning wasn't entirely wrong about the physics involved. The rifle did generate substantial recoil, and proper control required technique as much as strength. What he didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that Kira had been managing recoil and making impossible shots since before most of them had even enlisted. "You know what?" Manning said, his voice taking on a theatrical quality that suggested he was enjoying himself. "Let's make this interesting. Standard qualification course, but at extended range. 5 shots, prone position, no time limit. If you can put 3 rounds in the 10 ring at 400 meters, I'll personally apologize and buy you dinner at the classiest restaurant in Vegas." The challenge hung in the air like smoke from a fired round. Kira could hear whispered conversations starting up behind her as word of the impromptu competition spread. Money was probably already changing hands as bets were placed on the outcome. "And if I miss," she asked without looking up from her scope adjustments, then you admit that maybe, just maybe, there's some jobs that require a certain type of person to do them properly. No shame in it. Everyone has their strengths. Kira finally lifted her head and met his gaze directly. 400 meters, 5 shots, 3 in the 10 ring. That's right. Think you're up for it. The desert stretched out endlessly in all directions, broken only by the geometric lines of the training facility and the distant mountains that ringed the horizon. In a few hours, the heat would become unbearable and training would shut down until evening. But right now, in this moment, the only thing that mattered was the target waiting 400 meters downrange and the rifle that felt like an extension of her own body. The crowd that had gathered around the firing line grew larger as word of the challenge spread throughout the training facility. Marines from the adjacent range wandered over, their own weapons slung casually across their shoulders. A few Air Force personnel emerged from the equipment shed, curious about the commotion. Even some of the civilian instructors paused their morning routines to witness what was shaping up to be either a spectacular demonstration or an embarrassing failure. Kira settled into her firing position with deliberate care, feeling the familiar weight of the Mark 17 against her shoulder. The rifle's bipod legs dug into the sandy ground, providing a stable platform for the precision shooting that lay ahead. She adjusted her grip slightly, ensuring perfect alignment between her eye, the scope, and the distant target. 400 meters downrange, the silhouette target appeared small even through the magnified optic. At this distance, environmental factors became critical. Wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, even the Earth's rotation could affect bullet trajectory. Most recreational shooters never attempted shots at this range, and many trained marksmen found it challenging under ideal conditions. Manning paced behind her like a predator waiting for its prey to stumble. His teammates had arranged themselves in a semicircle, their expressions ranging from amused skepticism to outright anticipation of her failure. The betting pool had apparently grown more sophisticated, with odds being calculated not just on whether she would hit the target, but by exactly how much she would miss. "Take your time," Manning said, his voice dripping with false encouragement. "No rush at all. These things can be tricky if you're not used to them." Kira ignored the commentary and focused on her breathing. Inhale, exhale, natural respiratory pause. This was where the shot would break, in that moment of stillness between breaths when her body was most stable. She had learned this technique years ago, in places and circumstances that these men would never guess at. Through the scope, she could see heat mirages dancing between her position and the target. The morning sun was already beginning to warm the desert floor, creating thermal currents that would deflect her bullets if she didn't account for them properly. She made a slight adjustment to her point of aim, compensating for the wind she could feel against her cheek. The Mark 17's trigger was crisp and clean, breaking at exactly 3.5 pounds of pressure. Kira had dry-fired the weapon earlier to get a feel for its characteristics, noting the minimal over-travel and positive reset. Good triggers were essential for precision work, and this one met her standards. "You know," Manning continued, apparently unable to resist offering commentary, "most people get nervous when they're about to fail in front of a crowd like this. It's natural, nothing to be ashamed of. Hell, I've seen seasoned operators choke under pressure before." Chief Torino shifted uncomfortably beside his team leader. "Blake, maybe we should just let her shoot without all the talk." Manning waved off the suggestion. "She's a big girl, Blake. She can handle a little conversation. Can't you, Thorne?" Kira's response was to settle deeper into her shooting position and acquire her sight picture. The target's 10 ring appeared centered in her crosshairs, a black circle that represented the difference between success and failure, between respect and ridicule. She had been in this position before, though never with quite so many witnesses or such personal stakes riding on the outcome. The first shot was always the most important. It set the tone for everything that followed, establishing the shooter's capability and confidence. Miss badly on the first round, and doubt would creep in for the remaining attempts. But place it perfectly in the center, and the subsequent shots became exercises in repetition rather than tests of skill. A bead of sweat rolled down Kira's forehead despite the morning coolness. The desert sun was climbing higher, and soon the temperature would become oppressive. But right now, her focus was absolute. Her world narrowed down to the relationship between her rifle, the target, and the space in between. She could hear conversations happening around her, bets being adjusted as spectators evaluated her form and equipment. Someone mentioned that the Mark 17 was known for its accuracy, but also its punishing recoil. Another voice speculated about whether she had ever fired anything more powerful than an M4 carbine. Manning's voice cut through the background chatter with practiced authority. "Whenever you're ready, Thorne. We got other training to complete today, so don't feel like you need to take all morning analyzing the situation. Sometimes you just have to pull the trigger and see what happens." The challenge in his words was unmistakable, designed to pressure her into rushing the shot and making a mistake. It was a psychological tactic as old as competitive shooting itself, attempting to disrupt her mental process and force an error through artificial time pressure. Kira absorbed the comment without reaction, her breathing steady and controlled. She had learned long ago not to let external pressure dictate her shooting rhythm. The shot would come when her body and mind were perfectly aligned, not a moment before or after. Through her peripheral vision, she could see more personnel gathering at the edges of the firing line. Word was spreading through the facility about the unusual demonstration taking place. A female contractor challenging the assumptions of a SEAL team was apparently newsworthy enough to draw a crowd from across the base. The wind shifted slightly, coming now from her left rather than straight on. Kira made another small adjustment to her aim point, moving the crosshairs just a hair's width to compensate. At 400 meters, even minor environmental changes could move the bullet's impact several inches from the intended point. Her finger found the trigger's first stage, taking up the slack until she felt the distinct wall where the firing mechanism engaged. From this point, only a few more pounds of pressure would release the firing pin and send the first round downrange toward its appointment with destiny. The first shot broke clean and true, the Mark 17's report echoing across the desert like thunder. The rifle bucked against Kira's shoulder with authority, but she absorbed the recoil smoothly, her body positioned to manage the energy transfer without disturbing her sight alignment. Through the scope, she watched the bullet's trace as it arced through the morning air toward its target. A spotting scope mounted on a tripod beside the firing line allowed observers to see the impact point clearly. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, one of the Marine instructors, called out the result with professional neutrality. "Dead center, 10 ring. Perfect score." The murmur that rippled through the crowd was audible even over the ringing in everyone's ears from the rifle shot. Manning's confident expression flickered for just a moment before reasserting itself. He stepped closer to Rodriguez and the spotting scope, apparently needing visual confirmation of what had just been announced. "Lucky shot," Manning declared loud enough for everyone to hear. "Wind was probably perfect for that one. Let's see if she can do it again when conditions change." Kira worked the bolt smoothly, ejecting the spent brass and chambering a fresh round. The empty cartridge case glinted in the sunlight as it flew clear of the rifle, landing in the sand beside her with a metallic clink. She settled back into her shooting position without acknowledging Manning's comment, her focus already shifting to the second shot. The wind had indeed shifted again, now quartering from her right rear. This created a more complex ballistic problem, requiring her to adjust both windage and elevation to compensate for the bullet's drift. She made the necessary scope adjustments with practiced efficiency, her movements economical and precise. Chief Torino moved closer to his team leader, his voice low but still audible to those nearby. "That was a hell of a shot, Blake. Maybe we should consider that she might actually know what she's doing." Manning shook his head dismissively. "One shot doesn't prove anything, Blake. Consistency is what matters in the field. Any decent shooter can get lucky once. It's putting multiple rounds on target under pressure that separates the professionals from the pretenders." The second shot followed 20 seconds after the first, the interval measured and deliberate. Kira had used the time to read the wind and make final adjustments to her position. When the trigger broke, it came as no surprise to her, the shot timing perfectly coordinated with her breathing and natural body rhythm. 10 ring again, Rodriguez called out, his voice carrying a note of impressed professionalism. Touching the previous hole. That's some serious shooting. The crowd's reaction was more pronounced this time. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as the implications began to sink in. This wasn't beginner's luck or favorable conditions. This was precision marksmanship at a level that commanded respect regardless of who was behind the rifle. Manning's jaw tightened visibly, though he maintained a skeptical demeanor. All right, 2 good shots. But we're not done yet, are we, Thorne? 3 more to go, and the pressure's mounting now. Everyone's watching, wondering if you can actually finish what you started. Kira cycled the bolt again, her movements becoming more fluid with each repetition. The rifle was warming up now, its barrel temperature rising with each shot fired. This would affect the bullet's trajectory slightly, requiring minor compensation that most shooters never learn to account for properly. A small group of officers had joined the crowd, drawn by reports of exceptional shooting taking place on the range. Among them was Colonel Patricia Hayes, the base's deputy commander, whose presence added an unexpected layer of official scrutiny to what had started as a simple training challenge. The third shot preparation took longer as atmospheric conditions continued to evolve. The sun was climbing higher, creating stronger thermal currents that would push bullets vertically. Humidity was dropping as the desert air heated up, affecting both drag and trajectory. Each environmental factor required assessment and compensation. Manning checked his watch ostentatiously. Taking your time there, Thorne. Starting to feel the pressure now? It's one thing to make a couple of good shots when you're relaxed, but combat doesn't give you 5 minutes to analyze every variable. Actually, it often does, Colonel Hayes interjected, her voice carrying the authority of rank and experience. Precision shooting in military operations frequently involves extended observation and preparation. Patience is often more valuable than speed in sniper operations. Manning's expression tightened at the unexpected intervention, but he nodded respectfully to the senior officer. Of course, ma'am. I was just noting that battlefield conditions can be quite different from controlled range environments. Indeed they can be, Hayes replied, her attention focused on Kira's methodical preparation. Though I've seen enough combat marksmanship to recognize the real thing when I see it. The third shot broke with the same clean precision as the first 2, the rifle's recoil absorbed and managed with textbook efficiency. Kira's form remained consistent, her body position unchanging despite the growing weight of expectation from the assembled crowd. Another 10 ring, Rodriguez announced, his professional composure beginning to show cracks of amazement. 3 for 3, dead center mass. That's some of the finest shooting I've witnessed on this range. The betting pool had apparently collapsed entirely, with several Marines shaking their heads and walking away from what was clearly becoming a one-sided demonstration. Others moved closer to get a better view of the remaining shots, sensing they were witnessing something exceptional. Manning's confidence was visibly eroding now, though he continued his commentary with forced bravado. Well, she's halfway there. 2 more shots to go, and the hardest ones are always at the end when your heart rate starts climbing and your hands start shaking. Kira's hands remained perfectly steady as she prepared for the 4th shot, her breathing as controlled and rhythmic as it had been from the beginning. The rifle had become an extension of her will, responsive and familiar in ways that spoke to years of dedicated practice and natural aptitude. The 4th shot preparation unfolded with mechanical precision, each movement deliberate and unhurried despite the mounting tension radiating from Manning and his team. Kira adjusted her grip slightly, feeling for that perfect marriage between flesh and steel that separated good shooters from great ones. The Mark 17 had grown warm against her shoulder, its metal surfaces heated by the desert sun and repeated firing. Through her scope, she could see the target clearly despite the increasing heat shimmer. 3 perfectly placed bullet holes clustered in the 10 ring created a ragged opening that spoke to consistency and skill. 1 more shot in that same group would complete the challenge and settle the question of her capabilities once and for all. Manning paced behind the firing line with increasing agitation, his earlier swagger replaced by nervous energy. His teammates watched him with growing uncertainty, recognizing the signs of a leader whose assumptions were being systematically dismantled by reality. The psychological dynamics of the situation had shifted dramatically since that first perfect shot. "You know what's interesting about pressure?" Manning said, his voice carrying a forced casualness that fooled no one, "is how it affects different people in different ways. Some folks rise to the occasion, while others crack right at the moment when it matters most." Colonel Hayes positioned herself where she could observe both the shooting and the SEAL team's reactions. Her expression remained professionally neutral, but her eyes missed nothing as she evaluated the performance and the personalities involved. Years of command experience had taught her to recognize talent when she saw it, regardless of its packaging. The betting had indeed stopped entirely, replaced by hushed conversations and speculation about Kira's background. Several Marines were quietly discussing whether they had ever seen shooting of this caliber outside of specialized sniper schools. Others wondered aloud about her training history and previous assignments. Chief Torino moved closer to Manning, his voice barely audible above the desert wind. "Blake, maybe we should dial this back a notch. She's clearly competent with the weapon system." Manning's response carried an edge of desperation masked as determination. "Competent isn't the same as combat ready, Blake. Anyone can hit a stationary target on a perfect morning with unlimited time and ideal conditions. Real operations don't offer that luxury." The fourth shot broke with the same crisp authority as the previous three, the rifle's report sharp and clean in the dry air. Kira absorbed the recoil smoothly, her form unchanged by the accumulated stress of multiple shots and intense scrutiny. Through muscle memory developed over countless hours of practice, she immediately began her post-shot routine. For 4, Rodriguez called out, his voice now carrying undisguised admiration. "That's a group you could cover with a quarter. Outstanding marksmanship by any standard." The crowd's reaction was more subdued this time, as if everyone present understood they were witnessing something beyond normal expectations. Conversations had dropped to whispers, and several officers were taking notes or quietly making phone calls. Word of the demonstration was clearly spreading beyond the immediate vicinity. Manning's face had taken on a flush quality that had nothing to do with the desert heat. His carefully constructed challenge was crumbling before his eyes, each perfect shot undermining the assumptions that had seemed so reasonable just minutes earlier. The dining invitation he had offered so confidently now loomed as an expensive lesson in humility. "One shot left," he announced unnecessarily, his voice lacking its earlier authority. "All the pressure's on now, Thorne. 4 perfect shots don't mean anything if you can't close the deal on number 5. Actually, Manning, Colonel Hayes interjected smoothly, 3 perfect shots already exceeded your challenge parameters. Miss Thorne has already won your wager, quite decisively." Manning's expression tightened at the correction. "Of course, ma'am. I was simply noting that she's chosen to attempt all 5 shots rather than stopping at the minimum requirement." "Indeed she has," Hayes replied, her tone suggesting she found this choice significant in ways Manning probably didn't understand. Kira worked the bolt for the final time, the mechanical action smooth and positive despite the rifle's increased temperature. The last cartridge slid into the chamber with a satisfying click, ready to complete what had become far more than a simple marksmanship demonstration. The empty magazine would be her 5th and final opportunity to validate everything she represented. The wind had settled somewhat as the morning progressed, though thermal currents continued to create minor disturbances in the air column between rifle and target. Kira made her final scope adjustments with the same methodical care she had shown throughout, refusing to let anticipation or external pressure compromise her technique. Several more officers had arrived, drawn by reports of exceptional shooting taking place on the range. Among them was Master Chief Petty Officer Samuel Reeves, a legendary figure whose reputation for marksmanship excellence was known throughout the special operations community. His presence added another layer of professional validation to the proceedings. The gathering had taken on an almost ceremonial quality, with spectators arranged in respectful semicircles around the firing point. Cameras appeared as personnel began documenting what many sensed was a career-defining moment for everyone involved. The simple weapons qualification had evolved into something far more significant. Manning made one final attempt to assert control over the narrative. Remember, Thorne, this is just the beginning. Hitting targets on a range is one thing, but carrying that performance into actual combat operations requires a completely different set of skills and mental toughness. Kira's response was to settle into her final shooting position with the same calm precision she had demonstrated throughout. Her breathing remained controlled and rhythmic, her heart rate steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. The rifle felt like an extension of her will, responsive and familiar in ways that spoke to a relationship built over years rather than minutes. The fifth shot hung in the air like a moment suspended in amber, the bullet's trajectory invisible but inevitable as it carved through 400 meters of desert atmosphere toward its final destination. Kira maintained her shooting position even after the trigger broke, following through with the same discipline that had guided each previous shot. The rifle's recoil felt familiar now, absorbed and managed with unconscious competence. "Perfect 5 for 5, Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent range. "That's the finest shooting exhibition I've witnessed in 22 years of military service." The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the desert wind and the distant hum of air conditioning units working against the climbing temperature. Manning stood frozen behind the firing line, his mouth slightly open as the full implications of what had just occurred settled over him like a weight. Master Chief Reeves stepped forward, his weathered face showing the kind of professional appreciation that came from decades of evaluating marksmanship at the highest levels. "Outstanding shooting, Miss," he said simply, his words carrying more weight than elaborate praise from lesser sources. Colonel Hayes moved to examine the target through the spotting scope, taking her time to assess the group size and placement. Even from her position, the cluster of holes was visible as a single ragged opening in the 10 ring, testament to consistency that bordered on mechanical precision. Manning finally found his voice, though it lacked the confidence that had marked his earlier commentary. That was very impressive shooting, Thorne. You've clearly had some serious training somewhere along the line." The crowd began to disperse slowly, personnel returning to their interrupted duties with plenty to discuss in the coming hours. Several Marines approached Kira directly, offering congratulations and asking questions about her background and training history. Their professional curiosity was genuine and respectful, marked by the recognition that they had witnessed something exceptional. Chief Torino remained beside his team leader, watching Manning process the complete reversal of his expectations. The psychological impact was obvious, his earlier certainty replaced by confusion and what might have been the beginning of genuine respect. "Blake, I think we need to have a conversation about assumptions and first impressions." Manning nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the distant target where 5 bullet holes clustered in perfect testimony to Kira's skill. "Yeah, Blake. Yeah, I think you might be right about that." Kira began the methodical process of clearing and securing the Mark 17, her movements efficient and professional. The rifle had performed flawlessly throughout the demonstration, its mechanical precision matching her own shooting discipline. She ejected the empty magazine and locked the bolt back, visually and physically confirming the weapon was safe. Colonel Hayes approached as Kira completed her post-shooting routine, her expression thoughtful and evaluative. "That was remarkable shooting, Miss Thorne. I don't suppose you'd be interested in sharing some details about your background and training history." The question hung in the air with obvious significance, suggesting that Kira's performance had attracted attention at levels far above a simple range qualification. Her response would shape not only how she was perceived by those present, but potentially her future assignments and opportunities within the military community. "I appreciate your interest, ma'am," Kira replied carefully, her tone respectful but guarded. I've had extensive training in precision shooting, though much of it was in civilian competitive contexts rather than military applications. Hayes nodded understandingly, though her experienced eyes suggested she suspected there was more to the story than civilian competition alone could explain. Such shooting doesn't develop overnight, regardless of the context. Would you be available to discuss potential opportunities that might make better use of your obvious talents? The offer was significant, representing possible career advancement and recognition that had seemed unlikely just an hour earlier. Kira considered her response carefully, aware that Manning and his team were listening intently to every word of the exchange. I'd be honored to discuss any opportunities you might have in mind, ma'am. Though I should mention that my current contract obligations might limit my immediate availability for new assignments. Hayes smiled slightly, the expression suggesting she was familiar with the complexities of contractor agreements and personnel transfers. Those details can usually be worked out when there's sufficient motivation on both sides. I'll have my aide contact you about scheduling a more detailed conversation. Manning finally stepped forward, his earlier antagonism replaced by something approaching professional courtesy. Thorne, I owe you an apology. And apparently dinner at the classiest restaurant in Vegas. That was shooting at a level I wasn't expecting, and I let my assumptions get in the way of recognizing real capability. The apology was awkward but seemed genuine, spoken in front of the remaining witnesses with enough sincerity to suggest Manning was capable of learning from his mistakes. Kira accepted it with gracious professionalism, understanding that burning bridges served no one's interests. Master Chief Reeves lingered after most of the crowd had dispersed, his curiosity clearly piqued by what he had observed. Miss Thorne, I've been around precision shooting for longer than I care to admit, and that kind of consistency speaks to training and experience that goes beyond civilian competition. If you ever find yourself interested in specialized military applications, I'd be very interested in having a conversation. The implications of Reeves' interest were significant, suggesting opportunities within the special operations community that could represent a dramatic career shift. Kira filed the information away for future consideration, recognizing that the morning's demonstration had opened doors she hadn't expected. 3 days after the range demonstration, Kira found herself seated across from Colonel Hayes in a secure briefing room deep within the base's administrative complex. The walls were lined with maps and classified materials, creating an atmosphere of serious military business that contrasted sharply with the casual environment of the firing range where her reputation had been forged. Hayes slid a manila folder across the polished table, her expression businesslike but not unfriendly. What I'm about to discuss with you is classified at the secret level, Miss Thorne. Your current clearance allows for this conversation, but I need your verbal acknowledgement that you understand the sensitivity of what we're going to cover. Kira nodded formally, her hands folded in her lap as she maintained appropriate military bearing despite her civilian contractor status. I understand completely, ma'am. You have my assurance that anything discussed in this room will remain confidential. The folder contained personnel files, mission reports, and what appeared to be psychological evaluations. Hayes opened it deliberately, revealing photographs of various individuals in military gear alongside detailed biographical information that suggested these were special operations personnel of significant importance. We have a situation developing overseas that requires someone with your particular skill set. Hayes began, her tone shifting to the crisp professionalism of operational planning. A joint task force needs a precision shooter for a mission that's been classified as critical to national security interests. The photographs showed rugged terrain and hostile environments where conventional military operations would face significant challenges. Kira studied the images carefully, her trained eye automatically assessing sight lines, concealment opportunities, and potential shooting positions based on years of tactical thinking. Hayes continued without waiting for questions, her presentation suggesting this briefing had been carefully planned and rehearsed. The mission requires someone who can make shots at extreme range under adverse conditions. More importantly, it requires someone who can operate effectively in a joint environment where personal dynamics and team cohesion are absolutely critical. The implication was clear without being stated directly. Kira's demonstration had proven her shooting ability beyond question, but her response to Manning's hostility had apparently demonstrated something equally important about her character and professionalism under pressure. "Your performance on the range was impressive from a technical standpoint," Hayes said, closing the folder and leaning back in her chair. "But what caught our attention was how you handled the social dynamics of that situation. You remained focused on the mission despite significant provocation and distraction." Kira considered her response carefully, understanding that this conversation was as much an evaluation as it was a briefing. "Staying professional under pressure is part of the job, ma'am. Personal conflicts don't serve anyone's interests when lives are on the line." Hayes nodded approvingly, apparently satisfied with both the content and delivery of that answer. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need for this operation. The team you'd be joining has some strong personalities and entrenched attitudes about traditional roles and capabilities." The challenge was becoming clearer now. This wasn't just about marksmanship excellence, but about proving that integration and diversity could enhance rather than compromise operational effectiveness. Kira would be walking into an environment where her presence might be viewed as a political statement rather than a tactical asset. "I should mention that Petty Officer Manning has specifically requested to serve under your supervision for this mission," Hayes added with what might have been a slight smile. "Apparently your range performance convinced him that he had some learning to do about evaluating talent and capability." The irony wasn't lost on Kira that the man who had questioned her competence was now volunteering to serve in a subordinate role on a classified operation. It suggested that Manning's capacity for growth and adaptation might be greater than his initial behavior had indicated. Hayes opened another folder, this one containing technical specifications and equipment lists that made Kira's pulse quicken with professional interest. The weapons systems were state-of-the-art, representing the absolute pinnacle of precision shooting technology. Rifles that could reach targets at distances most people couldn't even see clearly. "The mission timeline is compressed," Hayes explained, spreading out deployment schedules and training calendars. "You'd have 2 weeks of intensive preparation with the team before deployment. Integration training, advanced marksmanship under simulated combat conditions, and psychological profiling to ensure unit cohesion." Kira studied the documents with growing appreciation for the complexity and importance of what was being offered. This wasn't just another contract assignment, but an opportunity to serve at the highest levels of military operations where her skills could make a genuine difference in critical situations. "The psychological aspects intrigue me most," she said honestly. "Building trust and effective communication in high-stress environments requires as much skill as any technical competency. How does the team currently feel about adding a female contractor to their operational structure?" Hayes leaned forward slightly, her expression serious and direct. "There's resistance, as you might expect. Some of it is cultural, some is traditional, and some is simply unfamiliarity with working alongside women in combat roles. Your job would be to prove that diversity enhances capability rather than compromising it." The weight of representation wasn't lost on Kira. She would be carrying the hopes and expectations of every woman who had ever been dismissed or underestimated in military contexts. Success would open doors for others, while failure would reinforce stereotypes and close opportunities for generations. "I understand the broader implications of what you're asking, ma'am. This isn't just about individual performance, but about changing perceptions and proving possibilities that some people don't want to believe exist." Hayes nodded gravely, recognizing that Kira understood both the opportunity and the burden being placed before her. "Exactly. The question is whether you're prepared to accept that responsibility along with the tactical challenges of the mission itself." The decision hung in the air between them, weighted with significance that extended far beyond any single operation or personal career advancement. 2 weeks later, Kira found herself in the pre-dawn darkness of a forward operating base somewhere in eastern Afghanistan, her breath visible in the thin mountain air as she conducted her final equipment checks. The specialized rifle system Hayes had shown her in the briefing folder now rested in her hands, its advanced optics and precision-engineered components representing the absolute pinnacle of long-range shooting technology. The mission had crystallized into stark reality over the past 14 days of intensive training. A high-value target had been located in a Taliban stronghold positioned on a mountainside that provided natural defensive advantages against conventional assault. The only viable approach required a precision shot at a distance that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible, even with the most advanced equipment. Manning approached through the darkness, his earlier antagonism completely replaced by professional respect and genuine concern for mission success. He carried additional ammunition and backup equipment, having appointed himself as her spotter and security element despite his higher rank within the team structure. "Weather's looking good for the next 6 hours," he reported quietly, his voice barely audible above the mountain wind. "Visibility should be optimal once we reach the shooting position. Wind conditions are favorable, but could change rapidly with the sunrise thermal shifts." The irony of their reversed roles wasn't lost on either of them, but both had set aside personal pride in favor of mission requirements. Manning's expertise in tactical planning and field conditions complemented Kira's shooting skills, creating a partnership that neither had anticipated but both had come to value during their compressed training period. Chief Torino emerged from the command bunker with final intelligence updates and last-minute operational changes. The target had been confirmed in position, but additional security elements had been detected that would complicate both approach and extraction. The margin for error had narrowed considerably since the original mission planning. "The shot distance has been recalculated at 1,800 meters, Torino announced, his voice carrying the gravity of what that number represented. "Environmental conditions include crosswinds, temperature variations, and altitude factors that will test every aspect of your training and equipment capabilities." 1,800 meters represented the extreme edge of practical marksmanship, a distance where atmospheric conditions, equipment limitations, and human factors all combined to create a shooting challenge that few people in the world could successfully complete. At that range, the bullet would be in flight for over 2 seconds, enough time for target movement to render even perfect aim ineffective. Master Chief Reeves joined the group as they prepared for insertion, his presence lending additional weight to the mission's importance. He carried specialized communication equipment that would allow real-time coordination with air support and extraction elements. But his primary value lay in decades of operational experience that had prepared him for exactly this type of high-stakes situation. "Remember that you're not just representing your own capabilities out there," Reeves said quietly, addressing Kira directly while the others completed their final preparations. "Every woman who's ever wanted to serve in combat roles is counting on your success today." The weight of that responsibility had been a constant presence throughout the training period, but hearing it stated so directly in the moments before deployment added a psychological dimension that technical preparation alone couldn't address. Kira nodded acknowledgement while internally compartmentalizing the pressure to maintain focus on tactical requirements. The insertion helicopter waited on the landing pad with rotors turning, its crew conducting their own final checks before departing into hostile territory. The aircraft represented the thin lifeline that would carry them to and from the shooting position, assuming everything proceeded according to plan and no unforeseen complications arose during the mission. Manning secured the specialized ammunition in protective containers designed to prevent temperature and impact damage during transport. Each round had been individually selected and tested for optimal ballistic performance, representing months of development work by military technicians who understood that mission success might depend on fractional differences in accuracy and consistency. The team moved toward the helicopter in tactical formation, their movements practiced and coordinated from countless training repetitions. Kira felt the familiar weight of combat gear and the specialized rifle system that had become an extension of her capabilities over the past 2 weeks of intensive preparation and qualification shooting. Colonel Hayes appeared at the landing pad for final mission authorization and personal encouragement. Her presence at this hour demonstrated the operation's importance within the broader strategic context, but also suggested personal investment in Kira's success that went beyond professional duty requirements. Weather window is optimal for the next 4 hours, Hayes reported over the helicopter noise, her voice carrying the authority of command decision-making. Intelligence confirms target location and security disposition. All elements are in place for mission execution. The helicopter lifted off into the darkness, carrying them toward a shooting position that would test every aspect of Kira's training and capabilities. Below, the Afghan landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, broken by mountain ridges and valleys that had challenged military forces throughout history. Manning checked his spotting equipment one final time, ensuring that communication systems and range-finding technology were functioning properly. His role as observer would be critical for making real-time adjustments based on environmental conditions and target behavior, requiring perfect coordination between shooter and spotter. The mission had evolved far beyond the simple marksmanship demonstration that had started this journey, but the fundamental challenge remained unchanged, proving that capability transcended traditional assumptions about gender roles in military operations. The helicopter touched down on a rocky outcrop 3 kilometers from the target location, its rotors kicking up clouds of dust and debris that would dissipate long before sunrise revealed their insertion point. Kira and the team moved quickly away from the aircraft, their night vision equipment turning the pre-dawn darkness into a green-tinted landscape of jagged terrain and potential concealment positions. The approach to the shooting position required 2 hours of careful movement through hostile territory, each step planned to avoid detection by enemy patrols and electronic surveillance systems. Manning led the navigation using GPS coordinates and terrain features, his experience in mountain warfare proving invaluable for selecting routes that balance speed with security requirements. The specialized rifle case strapped to Kira's back contained not just the weapon system itself, but also environmental monitoring equipment that would provide real-time data about wind speed, temperature, humidity, and atmosphere pressure. At 1,800 meters, even minor variations in these factors could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Chief Torino maintained communication with headquarters through encrypted satellite links, receiving updated intelligence about target movement and security changes that could affect the shot timing. The high-value target maintained irregular patterns of behavior that made prediction difficult, requiring constant adjustment of operational plans. As they climbed toward the designated shooting position, the altitude began affecting their breathing and physical performance. The thin mountain air reduced oxygen availability, potentially impacting fine motor control and cognitive function at the precise moment when both would be most critical for mission success. Manning established the spotting position first, setting up range-finding equipment and communication systems that would allow real-time coordination with Kira's shooting. His transformation from skeptical antagonist to dedicated support partner represented one of the most dramatic personal changes any of them had witnessed during their military careers. The target building became visible through high-powered optics as a distant structure nestled against the mountainside, its defensive positions and escape routes clearly planned to deter exactly the kind of precision attack they were attempting. Multiple guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements suggesting professional military training rather than casual militia organization. Kira began assembling the rifle system with methodical precision, each component fitting together with mechanical tolerance that reflected months of engineering development and testing. The weapon represented the absolute pinnacle of long-range shooting technology, but its effectiveness would ultimately depend on human skill and judgment under extreme pressure. The ballistic computer integrated into the rifle's optic system processed environmental data and calculated trajectory solutions automatically. But Kira knew from experience that technology alone couldn't account for all the variables that affected bullet flight at extreme distances. Human intuition and experience would be equally important for mission success. Manning provided continuous updates on wind conditions and target movement through their tactical communication system, his voice calm and professional despite the enormous pressure they all felt. Target is stationary in the primary window. Wind is steady at 6 miles per hour from the northeast. Range confirmed at 1,812 meters. The shot would require perfect timing, technical precision, and psychological composure that few people could maintain under such circumstances. Kira settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle against her shoulder and the solid contact points that would provide stability during the critical moments ahead. Through the advanced optics system, she could see the target clearly despite the enormous distance involved. The magnification was so powerful that even minor movements were amplified, requiring perfect shooting technique to maintain sight alignment and trigger control throughout the firing sequence. The morning sun was beginning to rise behind distant mountains, creating thermal currents that would affect bullet trajectory in ways that couldn't be precisely predicted or compensated for through technology alone. Timing would be critical to catch the brief window of optimal atmospheric conditions before heating air created unpredictable disturbances. Master Chief Reeves monitored broader tactical situation through communication with air support and quick reaction forces positioned for emergency extraction if the mission was compromised. His calm presence provided reassurance that contingency plans existed for various failure scenarios, though everyone understood that mission success depended primarily on Kira's ability to make an impossible shot. The psychological pressure was unlike anything she had experienced during training or civilian competition. This wasn't about personal achievement or professional recognition, but about military mission success in hostile territory where failure could have strategic consequences far beyond individual careers or reputations. Manning's voice came through her earpiece with final targeting information. Target has moved to the optimal position. All environmental factors are within acceptable parameters. You have a clear shot when ready. Kira's breathing settled into the controlled rhythm that had become automatic through years of training and practice. Her finger found the trigger's first stage, taking up slack until she felt the distinct breakpoint where additional pressure would release the firing pin and send the bullet on its long journey toward the distant target. The moment stretched like elastic tension, everything balanced on the edge of action that would determine not just mission success, but also the future credibility of women in combat roles throughout the military establishment. The shot broke clean and true in the thin mountain air, the rifle's suppressed report barely audible above the wind that swept across the rocky outcrop. Kira felt the familiar recoil against her shoulder, absorbed and managed with the same technical precision that had guided every aspect of her preparation. Through the scope, she watched the bullet's trace as it began its 2-second journey across 1,800 meters of hostile terrain. Time seemed suspended as the projectile arced through the morning air, carrying with it not just kinetic energy, but the hopes and expectations of everyone who had ever been dismissed or underestimated based on assumptions about gender and capability. The ballistic computer had calculated trajectory and environmental compensation, but success ultimately depended on human skill and judgment under extreme pressure. Manning tracked the bullet's flight through his spotting scope, his voice steady and professional as he provided real-time assessment. Good shot, good shot. Flight path looks optimal. Impact in 3, 2, 1. The distant impact was visible only as a microscopic disruption through high-powered optics, but the immediate cessation of target movement confirmed what the ballistic calculations had predicted. After traveling for over 2 seconds through varying atmospheric conditions, the bullet had found its mark with a precision that separated exceptional shooters from merely competent ones. Confirmed hit, Manning reported through the tactical communication network, his voice carrying professional satisfaction that had nothing to do with personal vindication and everything to do with mission success. Target is down. Primary objective complete. Master Chief Reeves immediately initiated extraction procedures, coordinating with air support and ground elements to ensure rapid departure from what was now a potentially compromised position. Enemy forces would respond quickly to the attack, making speed essential for team survival and mission security. The psychological impact of the successful shot rippled through the team members in ways that went far beyond tactical achievement. They had witnessed something that challenged fundamental assumptions about capability and performance under extreme conditions, forcing reevaluation of beliefs that many had held without question throughout their military careers. Chief Torino began dismantling communication equipment with practiced efficiency, his movements reflecting years of operational experience that had taught him the importance of rapid transition from mission execution to extraction. "Outstanding shooting," he said quietly to Kira as she secured the rifle system. That was world-class marksmanship under impossible conditions. The descent from the shooting position required the same careful attention to security that had marked their approach, but with added urgency as enemy forces began responding to the successful attack. Radio intercepts indicated significant activity in the target area as hostile forces attempted to understand what had occurred and organize pursuit operations. Manning moved with newfound respect for the person whose capabilities he had so dramatically underestimated just weeks earlier. His role as spotter had given him intimate appreciation for the technical and psychological demands of extreme-range shooting, along with recognition that gender had no correlation with performance under pressure. The extraction helicopter appeared on schedule despite the challenging conditions, its crew having maintained position in hostile airspace while the team completed their mission. The aircraft represented salvation and safety, but also transitioned back to a world where the implications of what had just occurred would need to be processed and understood. As they boarded the helicopter for departure, Kira felt the emotional weight of what had just transpired beginning to settle over her. The shot itself had been a culmination of technical preparation and training, but its success carried implications that extended far beyond individual achievement or professional recognition. Colonel Hayes would be waiting for their return with detailed debriefing requirements and operational assessments, but also with understanding that this mission had accomplished something beyond its stated tactical objectives. Barriers had been broken and assumptions challenged in ways that would influence military policy and personnel decisions for years to come. The team settled into the helicopter's cargo compartment for the flight back to base, each member processing the experience according to their own perspective and background. For Manning, it represented a fundamental revision of beliefs about capability and leadership. For Torino, it confirmed suspicions about untapped potential within the military community. For Master Chief Reeves, it validated decades of advocacy for performance-based evaluation rather than demographic assumptions in special operations assignments. His recommendation had carried significant weight in Kira's selection for the mission, and her success would strengthen his credibility for future integration initiatives. The Afghan landscape passed beneath them as they flew towards safety and debriefing, but the real journey had been psychological and cultural rather than geographic. Traditional barriers had been challenged and overcome through demonstrated competence under the most demanding conditions possible. Manning removed his tactical gear and settled back against the helicopter's bulkhead, his expression thoughtful and perhaps slightly amazed at how completely his worldview had been revised over the past few weeks. His transformation from antagonist to advocate represented the kind of personal growth that military service occasionally fostered in exceptional individuals. The mission's success would be classified and compartmentalized according to security requirements, but its broader implications for military integration and gender equality would influence policy discussions and personnel decisions throughout the defense establishment. Kira had proven that capability transcended traditional assumptions about physical requirements and psychological resilience. As the helicopter carried them toward debriefing and returned to routine military operations, each team member understood that they had participated in something historically significant that would be remembered and referenced long after the classified details were forgotten. The debriefing room at the forward operating base buzzed with activity as intelligence analysts processed the mission's tactical success and its broader strategic implications. Satellite imagery confirmed the target's elimination and the subsequent disruption of terrorist operations throughout the region, validating months of planning and preparation that had culminated in those critical seconds on the mountainside. Colonel Hayes presided over the formal after-action review, with a methodical thoroughness that characterized all special operations assessments. Her questions probed every aspect of team performance, equipment functionality, and operational procedures, but her attention kept returning to the human dynamics that had made success possible under such challenging circumstances. The ballistic analysis is remarkable, she observed, studying computer models that tracked the bullet's flight path through varying atmospheric conditions. 1,812 meters through mountain wind with perfect accuracy represents shooting at the absolute pinnacle of human capability. Manning sat across from Kira during the debriefing, his earlier skepticism completely replaced by professional admiration and what appeared to be genuine personal respect. His transformation had been witnessed by everyone present, creating a powerful example of how preconceptions could be overcome through demonstrated competence and shared adversity. I need to formally acknowledge that my initial assessment of Ms. Thorne's capabilities was completely wrong, Manning stated for the official record, his voice carrying the authority of someone willing to admit error and learn from experience. Her performance under combat conditions exceeded anything I've witnessed in 15 years of special operations. Master Chief Reeves nodded approvingly at Manning's statement, recognizing the professional courage required to publicly revise strongly held beliefs. The psychological dimensions of team integration had proven as important as technical competence for mission success, creating lessons that would influence future personnel selections and training programs. Chief Torino provided detailed analysis of communication procedures and tactical coordination, noting how seamlessly the team had functioned despite the compressed training timeline and unconventional leadership structure. His observations would become part of the institutional knowledge used to guide similar integration efforts throughout the special operations community. The equipment performed flawlessly throughout the mission, Torino reported, though he emphasized that technology alone couldn't account for the successful outcome. Human factors, particularly stress management and decision-making under pressure, proved more critical than any mechanical or electronic systems. Colonel Hayes turned her attention to the broader implications of the mission's success, understanding that its impact would extend far beyond the immediate tactical victory. Policy makers and military leaders throughout the defense establishment would study this operation as they evaluated integration initiatives and personnel assignment protocols. This mission represents a proof of concept for performance-based evaluation in special operations assignments, Hayes observed, her words carrying implications that everyone in the room understood. Traditional assumptions about physical requirements and psychological resilience have been challenged and found wanting. Kira listened to the discussion with professional detachment, understanding that her individual achievement had become part of a larger conversation about military effectiveness and social progress. The personal satisfaction of mission success was tempered by awareness that she had become a symbol rather than simply a skilled operator. The intelligence value of the successful operation continued to unfold as analysts processed captured communications and disrupted networks. Enemy forces had been forced to alter their operational patterns and defensive postures, creating opportunities for follow-on missions that could exploit the psychological impact of the precision attack. Manning approached Kira privately after the formal debriefing concluded, his manner suggesting he wanted to address personal rather than professional matters. His earlier antagonism seemed like ancient history given everything that had transpired since that morning on the firing range. "I owe you more than just an apology," he said quietly, his voice carrying sincerity that hadn't been present in their earlier interactions. "You've taught me something important about leadership and about recognizing talent regardless of where it comes from." The conversation represented closure on their initial conflict, while opening possibilities for future collaboration based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical authority. Manning's willingness to acknowledge error and learn from experience marked him as someone capable of growth and adaptation under challenging circumstances. Master Chief Reeves joined them as they prepared to leave the debriefing room, his expression showing the satisfaction of someone whose recommendations have been validated by exceptional performance. His advocacy for performance-based selection criteria had been strengthened by the mission's success, giving him additional credibility for future integration initiatives. "This won't be your last special operations assignment," he told Kira directly, his words carrying the weight of institutional authority. "Your capabilities are too valuable to waste on routine contractor assignments when critical missions require exactly the skills you've demonstrated." The offer represented career opportunities that had seemed impossible just weeks earlier, when her competence had been questioned based on assumptions about gender limitations. Success had opened doors and created possibilities that extended far beyond individual advancement to broader questions about military effectiveness and social progress. Colonel Hayes concluded the debriefing with formal recognition of the mission's success and its participants' exceptional performance. Her words would become part of official records that might influence military policy and personnel decisions for generations, creating institutional memory that transcended individual careers and assignments. As the team dispersed to their various duties and destinations, each member carried with them lessons learned and perspectives changed through shared experience under extreme conditions. The mission had accomplished its tactical objectives while demonstrating truths about capability and performance that challenged traditional assumptions about military service. 6 months after the successful mission in Afghanistan, Kira found herself standing before a joint session of military leadership at the Pentagon, her presence representing far more than individual achievement or career advancement. The classified briefing room contained senior officers from every service branch, their attention focused on lessons learned and policy implications that had emerged from her unprecedented performance under combat conditions. General Patricia Morrison, the first female 4-star general in Army history, presided over the session with the authority that came from decades of breaking barriers and challenging assumptions. Her own career had paved the way for opportunities that previous generations of military women could never have imagined, making her uniquely qualified to understand the broader significance of what Kira had accomplished. "The statistical analysis is compelling," General Morrison began, referencing detailed performance metrics that had been compiled over months of evaluation and comparison. "Ms. Thorne's mission success rate and precision shooting scores exceed 98% of current special operations personnel, regardless of gender or background." Manning sat in the front row of observers, his presence as a witness and advocate representing one of the most dramatic personal transformations anyone in the room had encountered. His journey from skeptical antagonist to dedicated supporter had become a case study in leadership development and bias recognition that was being incorporated into military training programs. "The psychological evaluation data is equally significant," continued General Morrison, highlighting research that had examined stress response, decision-making capabilities, and team integration factors. Performance under extreme pressure showed no correlation with traditional gender-based assumptions about combat effectiveness or leadership capability. Master Chief Reeves provided tactical analysis that drew on his decades of special operations experience, his recommendations carrying weight that influenced personnel policies throughout the defense establishment. His advocacy for performance-based evaluation criteria had been validated by mission results that spoke louder than theoretical arguments or political positions. Integration challenges proved minimal when competence was demonstrated clearly and unambiguously, Reeves reported, his words creating institutional support for expanded opportunities in previously restricted military roles. Traditional resistance dissolved when faced with undeniable evidence of superior capability and professional performance. Colonel Hayes presented operational data that showed how the successful mission had influenced tactical planning and strategic thinking throughout the military community. Enemy forces have been forced to adapt their defensive measures and operational patterns, creating advantages that extended far beyond the immediate tactical victory. The deterrent effect has been substantial, Hayes explained, showing intelligence assessments that demonstrated the psychological impact of precision attacks at previously impossible ranges. Hostile forces now assume capabilities that force them into defensive postures that limit their operational effectiveness and strategic options. Chief Torino addressed communication and team coordination factors that had proven critical for mission success, his analysis contributing to revised training protocols and integration procedures being implemented across special operations units. His observations about leadership dynamics under pressure had influenced selection criteria for future assignments. The technical aspects were flawless, but the human factors proved equally important, Torino noted, emphasizing how trust and mutual respect had developed through shared adversity and demonstrated competence. Professional relationships based on capability rather than demographic assumptions created operational advantages that enhanced overall mission effectiveness. The Pentagon briefing represented official recognition that extended beyond individual achievement to institutional change that would influence military policy for generations. Kira's success had proven that performance transcended traditional assumptions about physical requirements and psychological resilience in combat operations. General Morrison concluded the formal presentation with recommendations that would reshape personnel policies and assignment procedures throughout the defense establishment. Her words carried the authority of institutional leadership combined with personal experience that gave her unique credibility for addressing integration challenges and opportunities. Performance-based evaluation must replace demographic assumptions in all special operations assignments, Morrison stated firmly, her recommendation carrying the weight of policy directive rather than mere suggestion. Capability and competence represent the only relevant criteria for determining suitability for combat roles and leadership positions. The room's atmosphere reflected the gravity of decisions being made and policies being established that would influence military effectiveness and social progress for decades to come. Individual careers and assignments would be affected, but the broader impact involved fundamental questions about capability, opportunity, and institutional adaptation to changing realities. Manning approached Kira after the formal session concluded, his manner reflecting the professional respect and personal growth that had characterized their relationship since that transformative morning on the firing range. His presence at the Pentagon briefing demonstrated institutional recognition of his own development as a leader and advocate. "You've changed more than just military policy," he observed quietly, his words acknowledging the personal impact that extended beyond professional advancement or career opportunities. "You've proven that excellence comes in forms that some of us weren't prepared to recognize or appreciate." The conversation represented completion of a journey that had begun with dismissive skepticism and concluded with institutional validation and policy reform. Manning's transformation had become part of the official record, creating examples and precedents that would influence leadership training and bias recognition throughout the military community. As they prepared to leave the Pentagon briefing room, both understood that their shared experience had contributed to changes that would outlast their individual careers and influence opportunities for future generations of military personnel regardless of gender or background. 1 year later, Kira stood on the same Nevada firing range where her journey had begun, but now she wore the uniform of a newly commissioned officer in the Army's Special Operations Command. The morning sun cast familiar shadows across the desert landscape, but everything else had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible during those first challenging moments with Manning and his skeptical team. A new group of recruits had gathered for advanced marksmanship training, their faces showing the same mixture of confidence and uncertainty that characterized all military personnel facing unfamiliar challenges. Among them were several women whose presence on the Special Operations Training Range represented opportunities that previous generations could never have imagined possible. Manning approached across the firing line, now wearing the insignia of a senior instructor whose reputation for developing exceptional shooters had grown considerably since their first encounter. His transformation from antagonist to advocate had become legendary within the training community, creating powerful examples of personal growth and professional development under challenging circumstances. Ready to show them how it's really done, he asked with a grin that held no trace of his earlier skepticism or condescension. His question carried genuine respect and professional camaraderie that had developed through shared adversity and mutual recognition of exceptional capability. The demonstration that followed was both technical exhibition and powerful symbol of how far military integration had progressed in just 12 months. Kira's shots grouped with mechanical precision at distances that challenged even experienced marksmen. But the real impact came from watching young women in the audience realize that such performance was achievable through dedication and proper training. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, now serving as the primary marksmanship instructor for the facility, provided commentary that emphasized technique and training over any demographic considerations. His professional analysis focused entirely on mechanical fundamentals and mental preparation, treating exceptional shooting as a learned skill rather than an innate talent tied to gender or background. Outstanding form and follow-through, Rodriguez announced as Kira completed her demonstration. That level of consistency comes from thousands of hours of deliberate practice and absolute commitment to technical excellence. Master Chief Reeves observed from the side of the firing line, his satisfaction evident as he watched the next generation of special operations personnel absorb lessons about capability and performance that transcended traditional assumptions. His advocacy for merit-based selection had been vindicated by results that spoke louder than theoretical arguments or political positions. The psychological impact on the watching recruits was immediate and profound. Young women who had grown up hearing about limitations and restrictions now witnessed firsthand proof that excellence was achievable through proper preparation and unwavering commitment to professional standards. Colonel Hayes, now serving as Deputy Director of Special Operations Training, concluded the session with remarks that placed individual achievement within the broader context of institutional change and military effectiveness. Her words carried the authority of leadership that had guided transformation throughout the defense establishment. Performance remains the only standard that matters in special operations, Hayes stated firmly, her message directed at everyone present regardless of their background or demographic characteristics. Excellence demands dedication, training, and mental toughness that have nothing to do with traditional assumptions about physical capability. The training session dispersed as recruits returned to their various specialties and assignments. But many lingered to ask questions and seek guidance from someone whose achievements had opened doors and created possibilities that had seemed impossible just months earlier. Their conversations represented hope and ambition that would influence military careers for decades to come. Manning walked with Kira toward the base administration building, their conversation covering professional matters and personal reflections on how dramatically their relationship had evolved since that first confrontational morning. His growth as a leader and instructor had been enhanced by learning to recognize and develop talent regardless of its source or packaging. You know what the best part of all this has been? Manning observed as they reached the building entrance. Watching other people discover capabilities they didn't know they had. Turns out that when you stop telling people what they can't do, they start showing you what they can accomplish. The insight represented wisdom earned through experience and personal transformation that had benefited everyone involved. Manning's evolution from skeptical antagonist to dedicated mentor had created leadership development that enhanced training effectiveness throughout the special operations community. As Kira entered the building for her next assignment briefing, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from dismissed contractor to commissioned officer with unlimited career potential. The path had been challenging and sometimes discouraging, but it had ultimately proven that capability and determination could overcome any obstacle or assumption. The story of her achievement had spread throughout the military community, inspiring other women to pursue opportunities in previously restricted fields while demonstrating to skeptical leaders that performance transcended demographic categories. Her success had become part of institutional memory that would influence policy and personnel decisions for generations. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly beyond the base perimeter, its harsh beauty unchanged by the human dramas that played out against its backdrop. But for everyone who had witnessed the transformation of assumptions into respect and skepticism into support, The landscape would forever represent the place where barriers were broken and possibilities proven through courage, skill, and unwavering commitment to excellence. If you enjoyed this story of military courage and determination, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, character, or if you've had a similar experience where someone's hidden talent surprised everyone around them.